Hello and welcome back. Eddie Brodosovich, George Stoya here in SoonerScoop.com studios. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page. Josh McCuistion down in Houston. Is the weather a little bit better than it was yesterday down in the Houston area? Watching the national championship game last night, seemed like you guys were in it.
It was wet and cold all day yesterday. Now it's still pretty cold, but the sun's out, so it's not a. You guys know how it is. Like
Yeah.
in Houston, if it's below 60, they think it's they got to wrap their pipes. It's a dangerous deal.
I was gonna say, calling it cold in Houston is relative to what it is back here in Oklahoma today. Battling a little bit of a wind chill around 5 degrees, I think, on Tuesday morning. So. Mm-hmm. It is portal season. The college football season obviously comes to a close. Michigan wins the national championship on Monday night by 21 over Washington. And I think if there was anything that you took out of that game, it's you need a really good offensive line. And that's why we thought it would be a good time to stop down with Josh as Oklahoma's pursuit in the portal continues. They have three in line. You have Michael Tarquin, who made that announcement official on Monday afternoon. You have Spencer Brown, the offensive tackle from Michigan State, as well as, and I set myself up for this, Fabici Nwadwe. I think we'll just go with that. We need to get a pronunciation on it. I don't think that North Texas had and that's probably as close as I'm ever going to get it. Oklahoma has those three. Those are the commitments right now out of the transfer portal, part of the 11-member class that Oklahoma currently has that will be coming in here in a week's time, starting classes for the spring semester in Norman. Josh, this is where things get strange. This is where things get weird. I'm going to step back, help us make sense of kind of everything that's out there and kind of the lay of the land, because there are some names to know.
I like that you just took the easy stuff and then just handed this off to me, Eddie.
Well, I don't know if
gonna be.
Pronouncing Fabici's last name with as much trouble as I have in that regard does any help for myself, but I'll help you out even more. Lance Hurd, Terence Ferguson, those are definitely two names to know. Let's start with Lance Hurd, the offensive tackle prospect out of LSU, a very highly rated guy, and certainly somebody that if Oklahoma was able to get, it completely changes things, doesn't it? And especially at left tackle for Oklahoma.
It really does. This is a guy that, some of the initial stuff you heard, and, we've talked about it privately, guys, that there was some grade concerns or there was some, work ethic concerns. Talking to people at LSU, there's a lot of belief he's very special. I mean, this is a guy that was the number 11 overall player in the class of 2023, according to the On3 ranking. So this is a guy that, 6'5", 300 pounds, comes from a huge program in there in Louisiana at Neville High in Monroe. That again has a track record of producing big time players. One of those players being the guy who preceded him at LSU, Will Campbell, who is their starting left tackle and looks like he's probably going to be enjoying his farewell tour of college football next year because he looks like a future first rounder for LSU. So I think Lance Hurd just kind of got stuck behind him and just kind of got left in the wake and was going to be a guy that LSU was going to try to find a way to rotate in, all these things, but it wasn't going to happen. So he decided to enter the portal. He wants to play left tackle. He wants to have a real chance to start. Oklahoma seems to provide all of those things for him. And then you mix in the interest in Oklahoma's track record of producing offensive linemen, and it makes a lot of sense. It's just Oklahoma's battling Ole Miss, Tennessee, and some other schools that I don't think I'm, telling tales or anything, that we all know those are very active NIL programs. And so we'll have to see, is that, is Bill's track record enough to overcome some of that? Is that going to be what he chooses to focus on? And honestly, right now, it seems a little up in the air.
Josh, can you speak to, I feel like we always talk about Bill Beatenbow, and he's faced a lot of criticism this offseason because you see how many guys are leaving, and some of that's not his fault. Some of it maybe is, whatever it is. In this situation, in recruiting Lance Hurd, it sounds like Bill's done just about everything he can to try and get him to come to Oklahoma.
That's my impression. Talking to some people kind of from both sides of the fence, it sounds like, Bill knows. Like there's no lack of awareness on his part to know how important this could be for Oklahoma, how big this could be to maybe have that next guy that's that next kind of offensive lineman, that's a real, just the focal point of your line. You build the rest of your group around that guy. Hurd has a chance to be that kind of player. He's that talented. So I think they have poured themselves into this. They have done all that they could. There was talk when he took that Tennessee visit on Saturday that he wasn't going to leave Knoxville, that they were going to get him committed before he even left. And I think Oklahoma stayed involved, stayed in the game, got him down to Norman. From what I can gather, that trip went really well. I think Oklahoma had reasonable belief that they were going to be the choice. Now, this has dragged on. Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding, who was Hurd's primary recruiter when Golding was still at Alabama, when Hurd was coming out of high school. So Golding and Hurd know each other. There's a relationship there. I am told they believe they're going to get him on campus this coming weekend when the dead period ends on Friday. And when that happens, I think they will make a impressive offer, and I think Ole Miss has a hope of getting his commitment. I think that's what they believe is going to happen, according to some. Now, you'll talk to other people at Ole Miss that'll tell you they're not even expecting him to take the visit. So it's kind of hard to know who to believe. You're kind of getting two very different stories around that program right now. But there's no question Bill has poured himself into this, done all that he can, and I think it's just a matter of, I think it may just come down to what Hurd prioritizes. Like, what is his thought process as he makes this decision?
Ole Miss, man, they are just on a tear.
It's
in the
unbelievable.
portal.
It's unbelievable what they're putting together. I think it's been pretty obvious with what they've been able to do, whether it be Walter Nolan or whoever Ole Miss has been after. It seems like they just have been getting who they want on the on either side of the football. Is it weird to me that I hear the Pete Golding thing? How much of a relationship can you have that you're not even going to be on the same side of the field with him at practice?
And that's the interesting part. And again, I mean, it's also worth noting within that, Eddie, he didn't pick Alabama.
Sure.
He went to LSU.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
you know, like how lasting is that? I mean, obviously Golding was his area recruiter, and that makes sense. And so, again, I think it's more of a foot in the door, but I agree with you. I think it's one of those things that people love to say, oh, he recruited him out of high school. They've got a great relationship. I mean, do they? Like,
Yeah.
there's plenty of reasons
They know
to
each
think
other.
that's not. Yeah. They've met. They've shaken hands. They were part of the same official visit or whatever it may have been. So, you know, I get the thinking behind it, but it's kind of like the the teammates. Oh, well, they were teammates in high school. They're going to go to school together. It doesn't always work out that way. Like,
Sure.
I think people just, because it is so obvious, it's such an easy dot to connect, people tend to overhype that kind of stuff.
They also, Ole Miss just landed the kid from North Carolina, Diego Pounds. I mean, he started at left tackle for North Carolina. So going back to Josh's original point of Lance Hurd wanting to go somewhere that he's going to start, it's like, I don't know. It's just head scratching, man, how Ole Miss keeps landing all of these guys. They're going to be an interesting team to watch because they've basically built their team through the portal the last couple of years. But Josh, I want to ask you, what does this mean for guys like that are already on campus? Whether it's a Jacob Sexton, who I think we all kind of penciled in as a potential starter next year. He started a lot of games this last year for Oklahoma. I mean, what does this mean for some of those guys? And does this mean? I mean, the amount of people that they've gone out and got in the portal on the offensive line, it feels like all five positions are pretty much going to be open game.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. And to follow up your previous point, George, Ole Miss is expected to bring in Gerald Mincey, the offensive tackle from Tennessee that was a starter for them last year. So you kind of like at some point that's three tackles. Like, well, how does that work out numerically? You know, what do they focus on? What do they prioritize? But yeah, to pivot to Oklahoma and what their situation is, it does make you wonder, like, what does that become of Jacob Sexton? Because that's been the one thing I think we all kind of assumed we knew. Jacob Sexton was going to move to left tackle from right tackle, where we saw him at the end of last year. And that was going to be more natural, more comfortable for him. Now, you give the kid a full off season and he plays right tackle. Okay, great. But then where does that leave Spencer Brown? Like there's like a domino effect where you kind of wonder. But to me, if you can get, if a focused Lance Hurd shows up and he buys in, you believe that he's going to do what you want him to do. To me, he's worth the squeeze because that's the most talented offensive lineman you'll have in your room. Like that, I don't think it's. I don't even know how debated it would be. I think he's a very gifted guy, and I think Oklahoma has both within their portal class and within what's on the roster right now there's some NFL guys in there. Lance Hurd has a chance to be like a top 10 type of guy. Like that's how talented he is. So we'll kind of have to see what becomes of that. But yeah, I mean, to me, guys, I mean, you look at it, I think we kind of thought Troy Everett was going to be the choice, but now knowing he was injured in the bowl game and how long that may sideline him, I don't know that I've heard a definitive answer on that. But there is, I don't think there's anything set now. Part of me thinks Bill Bedenbaugh loves that. Like, we know he loves to tinker. We know he loves to mess with lineups and see who's the best bet. And there's nobody that you say, well, sure, that guy's got the job. There's no question. He's absolutely going to do this or that. So he really can mess with it and see where he goes and see who's best. Because if you wanted to slide Spencer Brown in and let him play guard, I don't think that's insane. Like, he's a huge guy. I would more than think he could handle that job. So we'll see. I mean, there's a lot to play out. But, I mean, to me, if you can get Hurd in, it kind of bridges the gap of losing Caden Green. You get an elite talent from the portal that you weren't expecting to get to make up for the one you weren't expecting to lose. And then you can kind of keep building your offensive line. And maybe, like I said, you have that linchpin guy at left tackle that you can kind of build everything else around.
Goes without saying that Lance Hurd, number one on Oklahoma's want list in terms of offensive portal or offensive lineman in the portal. That leads us to another player from the SEC, Terence Ferguson, an interesting name, 6'4", 322, redshirt sophomore from Alabama. What kind of is his situation as he has entered the transfer portal looking for a new destination, or is it a possibility that he ends up back in Tuscaloosa?
He's a really interesting one, and he's gotten to just kind of fly under Hurd's shadow. Like, just almost there's no pressure about him. I don't feel like I'm getting nearly as many questions about his situation, but this is a guy that started a game for Alabama last year. And I know that people say, well, one game. Well, I mean, how many starts does Oklahoma have returning? Like that is a guy that can help OU. I think would instantly be part of that conversation at left guard, where Oklahoma doesn't, no matter how you look at the situation right now, there's not a guy that you say, oh yeah, that's your starting left guard next year. There are question marks that you could attach to anybody that would be involved in that conversation, Ferguson included, but at least he has some experience. He's obviously played at a big-time program like Alabama and has SEC experience. So I think he's incredibly interesting. Another really highly regarded guy, surprise, surprise, leaving Alabama's roster. I think he was number 55 or something overall in the class of 2022, or was it 21? 21, I'm sorry. So this is a guy with a lot of promise. I've watched some of his USF tape that was his one start last year, kind of an infamous game for Alabama fans. Didn't think he played poorly. He's an athletic guy, can move in space. I mean, he fits a lot of the boxes that Bill would want him to check. So I think there is definite reason for hope there. I think like you said, Eddie, it seems like if he's going to leave Alabama, it's going to be Florida State or Oklahoma. I think that's the two that have kind of emerged for him, with the possibility remaining that he could return to Alabama. That door seems to be open to him if he wants to walk through it. And I think Alabama has some interest there. Like, I think they would like to, and I think he is receptive to that possibility. But again, it really feels like if there was a three-sided coin, that's kind of what you're looking at. Like, none of these answers would surprise me at all between those three programs.
Josh, is there a timeline for when these guys are going to decide? I know that's just putting you on the spot
Josh's
here.
head's about to explode.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I know that, like, you have the Hurd thing where he might want to go visit Ole Miss this weekend. I'm not sure about Ferguson. Or is this something that, I mean, it could literally pop as we're, recording this?
I think in regards to Ferguson, it could be any minute now. Like, I think that's just a matter of him collecting whatever, data, whatever offer sheets, however you want to look at that, just final information, and then saying, okay, this is what I want to do. With Hurd, to me, it's all about this potential Ole Miss visit. If he takes that Ole Miss visit, A, I don't feel very good about Oklahoma's chances, and B, it's going to go through the weekend, either way. But if he doesn't, then there's nothing to hold him back. I mean, it's really Oklahoma and Tennessee, and make a choice. And like I said, there are Ole Miss folks that don't think he's going to take that trip, or at least didn't as of late last night, kind of going through the national championship game. So, again, it is a very mixed bag of information on him. But I will say he remains in contact with Oklahoma. They're doing all that they can do. They are making sure he knows what a priority he is and the kind of role that he could have for them. Now, anybody out there that says, "Oh, OU's guaranteeing him something," we all know Bill Bedenbaugh. That's not happening. Like Bill's just not that personality type, and I don't think he could do it even if if Brent Green lighted him and said, "Hey, go do that. Just promise him the left tackle job." I don't think he'd do it, partially because of who he is and partially because I think he knows that would be unfair to some of the other guys he has on that roster that he thinks should get a chance at that spot. So, but again, I really think Oklahoma, as much as maybe any guy they've pursued in the portal this year, has poured themselves into this opportunity.
That leads us to a guy that is in. He made it public on Monday afternoon. Michael Tarquin, Florida, played 34 games in Gainesville, went out to Los Angeles, played for Lincoln Riley a year ago, and now he's going to use his final year of eligibility in Norman, we think. I know that you put some stuff up on the Crimson Corner. It's a good time to be part of Soonerscoop.com, just $1 per month. Good time to really get in as Oklahoma basketball on the men's and women's side heats up, as well as all the portal stuff. We're going to be talking about spring football before we know it. Like I said, you got the host of all the early enrollees coming in, the transfers coming in at the end of the weekend to start classes next week. What can you tell us about Michael Tarquin and just in terms of what he is as a college player? Is this a guy that certainly will add something of depth for Bill Bedenbaugh and the Oklahoma offensive line group?
Yeah, this is a guy that again, with what I talked about earlier, with the way that Bill likes to tinker and mess with, especially in the spring. Honestly, you guys know that better than me. I mean, like, you guys go out to a practice or the times you get to see him, that line's different every time. Like, it's always, okay, we're going to move this guy from right to left or tackle to guard, or we're going to give this guy a look at center, whatever it may be. Tarquin's a perfect fit for that because he's played some guard, he's played some tackle, he has experience across the board. He's played in the SEC, like you mentioned, for Florida. This was a guy, for those that don't remember, was a fairly important recruit for Bill as a high school player. He was a guy that Oklahoma really liked and pursued, dating back to the Lincoln Riley era, which was kind of the connection that led him out to USC. So this is an interesting one. Now, I will say, Eddie kind of alluded to we think, and that's right, because there is some buzz out there, and he's taken down some of his commitment, tweets. I know his mother has removed some stuff as well that leads one to believe that he's not as sure about that decision as he was 24 hours ago. Welcome to the portal. This is the way it goes. But there is, I think there is some concern from his side of things about the two guys we just mentioned, Ferguson and Hurd, and Oklahoma continuing to pursue those guys. And where does that leave him in this equation? Like I said, I think Hurd is just too talented to walk away from for really anybody else that's in the portal. Like, I just don't know how you could make that choice because of what he could possibly bring. And my impression is that Tarquin would like to play tackle. I think that's where he sees himself. So I think he saw it as a chance to come in, compete at left tackle. And if that didn't work out, okay, fine. But if Hurd comes in, I think he knows his chances probably drop significantly. So, again, there's so much of everything I'm saying that is ending with "we'll have to see," because it's just unknown. Like, this isn't the news just hasn't broken yet. Like, decisions haven't been made. He was all set, and then I think it became real. And that's honestly, his reaction was the first time that I started to take Hurd to Oklahoma seriously, because it's clear. Again, OU was up front with him. They were honest, and he was hearing it through the grapevine and from other schools. Like, that's where that stuff's going to come from, is these other schools saying, hey, man, don't get too gung-ho about Oklahoma. They're going to get that kid from LSU. And obviously some of that's just negative recruiting, but some of that's what those schools are hearing too. So we'll kind of have to watch all of this. But there, again, it is amazing the domino effect that is going to happen, because like I said, if Ole Miss were to land the Gerald Mincey kid to go along with Diego Pounds, where does that leave Zalance Hurd? So there are multiple schools that are kind of juggling with one hand and then trying to keep their guys happy in the other hand. It's kind of a wild scenario.
Josh, and I get that from Tarkin's perspective. I mean, it's his last year of college football. I'm sure he wants to go somewhere that he's going to start. But from Oklahoma's perspective, they just need bodies, right? Like, I mean, they need to get as many guys in here as possible. And when you have a chance to get somebody as talented as Hurd or Ferguson that have several years left of eligibility, you got to take those guys, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and guys, as I'm looking at it, looking at our scholarship chart that we have up on the site, they have 12 guys that will be taking part in spring practice as things stand. Now, if they were to land Hurd and Ferguson, okay, you're up to 14, and that's in the ballpark, guys. But bare minimum, you want to be running out of 3 deep. Like that's what your numbers want to be. It's anywhere from 15 to 18 scholarship guys on that offensive line, and Oklahoma's really going to have to close to even get close to it. So that is a little bit tricky. And obviously they've got walk-ons and they've got bodies that can fill, but it's just a deal where that's a lot to ask. And that's, again, including 4 early enrollees from their 2024 class. So you've got a lot of guys learning, a lot of happening, and it's spring ball. Like that's part of the equation too. But this was, people have said, OU, did they do something wrong here? Yeah, the 2021 and 2022 classes had 4 scholarship signees on the offensive line. That's not sustainable. That this was gonna happen, and this is those chickens coming home to roost when Oklahoma gets stuck having to land this many portal guys to try and fix their numbers shortcomings.
Final question from me, just in terms of offensive line. Just reading between what you've said and kind of putting 2 and 2 together, it doesn't seem like we live in a world where Oklahoma would bring all 3. They certainly would want to, but probably not going to happen in terms of landing Hurd, landing Ferguson, as well as Tarquin to add to the other 2 that are coming in.
That's my gut.
Yeah.
That would be my answer. Now, I think there's absolutely a world where Ferguson and Tarquin can live together, or Hurd and Ferguson can live together. I don't know if Hurd and Tarquin can live together.
Sure.
Now, maybe Oklahoma can come to him and say, hey, man, we see your best NFL future playing a little closer on the inside of the line. Would you be interested in moving into guard? We think we could have a spot for you there if they land Hurd. If not, though, you bring Tarquin in, you hope you get Ferguson, you create some competition there at the left guard spot, and then you have Sexton and Tarquin probably competing for your left tackle position. So, and again, that's just me spitballing. We'll have to see how it actually plays out. But my guess is your best case scenario is 2 of those 3.
Very good. In terms of a position that has really they did what they needed to do, and they being Joe John Finley, is the tight end position. You had Bauer Sharp already in-house as far as a commitment from Southeastern Louisiana, and Oklahoma got the news yesterday on Monday afternoon, making it official that a familiar name, I think, to a lot of people in OK Prep's world, Jake Roberts headed back to Norman to take on or to join the Oklahoma football program. Obviously went down to North Texas out of Norman North High School and then transferred to Baylor last year, entered the transfer portal yet again, and here he is ending up in Norman. We'll get to the Nate Roberts stuff, his younger brother, one of the top 2025 tight ends out there in the country. But just in terms of what Jake brings to the program, Josh, we've seen what he's been able to do. 6 catches, 772 yards, and 4 touchdowns over the course of his career, or his collegiate career. What kind of player are they getting to join the tight end position that is now kind of revamped? It feels a lot better than maybe it did a month ago.
It's wild. And again, we've talked a lot about Brandon Hall. Joe John Finley deserves a lot of credit.
Sure.
They've done good work to get this tight end room back to a not just a functional level, but a promising one, guys. Because, I mean, I always think of it like when you have a one or, whether it's running backs or tight ends or any position where there's a limited number of players on the field, I like it a lot when you have that experienced guy, maybe 2 experienced guys, and then you've got that young guy that you think is really promising. Obviously, they have that in Devon Mitchell. We've covered that a lot. But to add Jake Roberts with Bauer Sharp, I think you really get a nice kind of balance between those two, where Bauer Sharp's still kind of learning the position, but is an extremely big, athletic guy, where Jake Roberts is maybe not the twitchy athlete that Bauer Sharp is, but he's very experienced. He's played a lot of football. He's very familiar with Seth Luttrell's offense. He's gonna know the calls. He's gonna know the checks. He's gonna be ready to roll. And you almost wonder if, as Seth Luttrell's teaching, all these guys what he wants them to do and kind of marrying that to what they know. At the same time, like Jake Roberts is gonna be like, let's go. Like I know more than this. Like I'm ahead of the curve. So I think you're going to see that help a lot. And I think Oklahoma can do a lot of double tight stuff, which I know people say, oh, it's the spread. They don't want to do that. You go back and watch Seth Luttrell through the years. He's more than comfortable being big and heavy up front and running 2 or 3 receivers and being very, I don't want to say jumbo sets, but just using a lot more 12 personnel and those kind of things. He's perfectly okay with that. So I like what Jake Roberts brings. And again, we can, the addition of, or the possible addition of his brother, that of course is great. That's kind of silver lining, but this is, I just like this not only because I think Oklahoma's brought in a good player, but Eddie, and Jake as well. Like this is something he's wanted, and I'm happy for the kid to finally kind of land where I think he wanted to be all along.
Josh, I think my only question is, can he be more effective than Austin Stogner was in the passing game? I mean, is this somebody that can really be somebody that can become an actual target? Because it felt like Austin Stogner was just not existent. I mean, we talked a lot about it a lot last year.
Looking to replace 17 receptions, 196 yards, and 1 touchdown. And I'm not saying that to be negative about Austin Stogner and what he gave to the program and his return to Norman. It's a reality, though. They need more out of the tight end position.
Guys, I mean, in the preseason, I thought I made a prediction that OU's tight ends wouldn't have 30 catches. They ended up with 20 as a unit. Like that, I almost regardless of what you did, it was going to be better than that. And like you said, Eddie, that's not a shot at Austin Stogner, but this is a chance where I'm going to have to put my money where my mouth is a little bit, because I think anybody that's listened to the podcast through the last year, watching on YouTube, I've made plenty of comments about, well, you could have had Jake Roberts and you didn't get him. And so now we're going to see. We're going to see if Jake Roberts can help. Now, it is a difference in that I think there are more tight ends that can help, guys, because we've talked about it again amongst ourselves. Caden McIntyre is very interesting. Sure. I think anybody not taking stock of him, we know Caden Helms is a guy that Joe John Finley and the staff believes in if he can ever stay healthy. So there are multiple options there that are really interesting. And then again, this all forgets one of the most highly regarded tight ends Oklahoma's ever signed. So there is that room has flipped on its head. There's no question. But yeah, if Jake Roberts was your starting tight end from week 1 to the end of the season, I absolutely believe he could be a 35 catch, 450, 500 yard guy. I'm not saying he is a future first-round pick or anything like that, but Jake Roberts is absolutely capable of being a very good player for you.
He's not Mark Andrews, but he's better than Austin Stogner, which you need.
Yeah, I mean, the entire position, as you said, Josh, has really kind of helped itself. And, I don't know if he's ever going to turn into somebody, but just watching him play as much as he did in the Alamo Bowl, the Josh Falui kid is certainly interesting just from a physical standpoint. He has a long way to go learning the game of football as he gets his, back into the sport after, basically being a basketball player at the back end of his high school career and then his first year in college. So it's certainly interesting to see. There was good news from a team perspective. Jalil Faro, George, you reported on Monday afternoon that he will return for his extra season in Norman, as well as Trace Ford, the Oklahoma State transfer, is going to be headed back to play for Miguel Chavis at the defensive end position.
Yeah, I think it's look. I think both were kind of expected, right? I mean, Jalil Faro especially is a guy that I think we all just assumed that he would be back. But in today's day and age of college football, you kind of have to check in and make sure. And I think his role is going to be really interesting next year because they bring in Deion Burks, who I think we all think is going to be a major contributor. You bring back Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, Andrell Anthony's coming back from injury. You wonder what role will Petaway have, Brennan Thompson. I mean, that room is loaded. So what role does Farouk play? We talked about moving him maybe in the slot. Maybe that would provide some help there, especially you lose Drake Stoops. So, but I think he's a guy, guys, that you like to have. Did he have his mistakes last year? Yeah, and the fumbling issues have to be corrected. But you take a guy that's had as many catches as he's had, has played as much football as he's had. He's been a contributor on special teams. And I think you also have to appreciate his loyalty to the program. I mean, he's had every opportunity to leave during his career at OU. I mean, you think back, he's best friends with Caleb Williams. You know that they recruited him to go to USC, stuck it out at Oklahoma. Again, he probably could have left after this year or last year if he wanted to, and he didn't, and he stuck it out. And I think there's something to be said about that. And then I think Trace Ford on the other side, is he going to be a starter? No, I don't even know how much he's going to be in the rotation when you talk about Ethan Downs and Adibare, and you bring in the Woolard kid and R. Mason Thomas if he's healthy. But again, another guy that I think you want to have in your locker room, and you're going to need depth. And at some point, he's going to have to play. And again, you get a guy that has played a lot of snaps. I think it's valuable getting those two guys back.
I'll just say it. I'll say what I'm thinking because I'm probably going to say it on Twitter and it's going to come across the wrong way. But if you're one of these idiots out there that is up in Georgia's DMs or anybody's DMs saying that, oh, they don't need Jalil Farouk or the guy sucks or anything like that, you're an idiot loser. Like, let's just put that out there. I'm so sick of these fans that are just completely in their feels right now about where the status of the Oklahoma football program is. And I think it's because you're jealous, obviously, of what Michigan was able to build into this season. Everything that went into it, besides all the cheating stuff, you can feel about how you want it, however you weigh. But it's just ridiculous to sit here and belittle a guy basically because he loves the University of Oklahoma and wants to come back and play for Emmett Jones. It's weird to me, and I've kind of just had enough of it.
And the thing about Jalil is, yes, he had his lows this year, and they were on full display in the last game of the season. I think that's what everybody thinks of. But don't forget what he did against Texas. They don't win that game without Jalil Farouk. They also don't win the BYU game without Jalil Farouk making a couple big grabs in that game. And so I think he can have a role on this team. Is he going to be a superstar? No, I don't think he is. But I do think he can play a very important role on this team, especially too when you talk about having some new guys coming in, some young wide receivers as well. There is importance to that. And the wide receiver room, of all the rooms that we want to talk about having issues, the wide receiver room is not one that I'm particularly concerned about.
Not at all. Josh, do you think that they would end up looking at, I think that we've talked about it on the Unofficial 40. We've talked about it on the postgame podcast multiple times. Is this a situation with Deion Burks coming in from Purdue? Would they look at maybe moving Jalil inside? Would that be a more comfortable position for him to perform at and contribute for Oklahoma in 2024?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, and there is, I know everybody would talk about the jet sweeps and those kind of things. Like I think he could work in that role. There's absolutely a limitation to what you can reasonably expect from him. But part of me, guys, wonders are some of the shortcomings that he went through just a product of Oklahoma having to ask a guy to do more than he was equipped to do. Like, and I don't mean that like he's not a great player, but at a place that's, like Oklahoma, that is going to try to go the places Oklahoma wants to go, Jalil Farouk shouldn't have to carry as much of the water as he was asked to at times last year. Just again, like you're just asking a guy to do more than he's capable of. It's kind of a perfect example. You brought up Michigan, Eddie. Look at those Washington guards last night against the big boys from Michigan up the middle. Those are perfectly acceptable college football players. But when you get on that stage against that kind of talent, it shows. Like it's different. It's not the same. And I think that's part of it too, is that at times Oklahoma would lean on Farouk, and I don't think he's that kind of guy. I don't mean that like he's soft or anything like that. I just mean there is a limit to what he can bring to an offense.
I don't think he's a guy that you need to be lining up at running back. Like that doesn't need to be. And I get it. He did some of that in high school. This is different. They should not have to be doing that. He's a guy that should get a few targets a game. Maybe he's returning kicks. I mean, maybe returning punts. Like that's the type of player that he is. I think that you're right, Josh, that at times, and it wasn't totally his fault. I think Andrel Anthony going down really kind of threw him into a position that maybe he wasn't totally ready for. And so I do think that having as many guys as they do coming back next year and also running a little bit of a different offense, I think can help him a lot.
It's interesting times.
I think if you want to see him vanish, put him in the room with DeMarco Murray. Like I don't see that going well, guys.
No. I don't think that's going to happen. It's interesting time, certainly on Soonerscoop.com. Oklahoma basketball headed out on the road for a pair of really tough games coming up this week in Fort Worth and then Allen Fieldhouse on Saturday. I know the Bob Brisbilla is going to be up there. I might be up there. I got a bone to pick with you, state of Kansas, sports information, all that kind of stuff. We'll get into that in the unofficial 40 coming up on Wednesday. But, Josh, we appreciate it. It's certainly going to be interesting here over the course of, certainly the next 24, 48 hours on possibly maybe into the weekend. Oklahoma certainly hopes not when we're talking about Lance Hurd, but it should be interesting. Oklahoma's continuing to try to reload or try to get guys in, try to get bodies in for depth and maybe starting possibilities on the offensive line moving into 2024 and everything that comes with the SEC, which is it's going to be here before we know. We're going to be talking about spring football and all that kind of stuff and maybe possibly headed back down to – oh, no, they're going to Dallas. I was going to say possibly headed back out to Nashville. So SEC Media Days. Dallas, be there, be square. For Josh, George, I'm Eddie. $1, Soonerscoop.com. Come join us. Really good time. And we will be right back here probably sometime soon with Bob Brisbilla talking about the big week that is for Sooner Hoops right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel.